I'm going to be talking about the self in terms of a personal or collective history, and the skills that for healing, and how this is the inlet and also the outlet for bodily power. So I'll start with, where did I come from? What's my history that I can talk about this? And anybody who can relate to me or see it in the people around you, this is kind of like the passage. This is the passage, and how many of us have felt pain by it or caused pain. And these are ways we judge ourselves. This is beliefs that have been conditional. These are what allow us to have information, what doesn't work, what we do want, and incorporates the different powers that were either repressed or misaligned. And in other words, we can use these very historical kind of these phases in our history, to heal and to awaken to the specialness that was either not being recognized in ourselves or others, or in the world, or in life. So I wrote a list, and you're welcome to write your own. I'm just gonna read it. And these are things some memories, whatever came up after a meditation. So this is where I came from. Cheap, reactive, body obsessed, drug addiction, codependency, disconnection, narcissism, traumatized, aggressive, angry, bully, judgmental, possessive, clingy, selfish, impulsive or compulsive, self-loathing, stingy, impatient, self-victimizing, cheating, lying, wasteful, careless, fat, ugly, dirty, PMDD or premenstrual dysphoric disorder or suicidality, hairy, smelly, dishonesty, arrogance, hypocrisy, superficiality, greed, pig, jealous, negative. I was ashamed, and as an adult in fight or flight survival mode. And an adult child, sorry. I was ashamed and an adult child in fight or flight survival mode. I made it from dark to light. Medication helped some of the way, then yoga, meditation, nature gave me sufficiency, balancing, hydrating the skin, drinking enough water for the inner skin, not running away into food or sex or movies, music, sex, alcohol, masculine attention, friendships that are distracting, computer games, novelty, shopping. I'm going to write pills, because I wrote drugs, but I'll write pills, and then I'll also write drugs. So both of those. I remember at 12 or 13 discovering chat rooms and talking with boys for cyber sex, because it made me feel desirable. One even became a pen pal and sent me a letter while I was in a camp called Camp Amuna. I was young, about that age. I had no real friends, basically, and shoplifting and graffiti with my teenage friends, which were all misfits like me, rebellious. I was defining myself by my pain and my weakness, by my self-judgment. I was too afraid to be seen by anybody. I was like, are you my mother? Are you my mother? Are you my mother? To everything and everyone. I felt like I was one of the only ones, if not the only one, in my generation among my relatives to ask for help, to get away from the dysfunctions. So what are some ways in which I feel that these were inlets or outlets into myself, and for the sake of having a sense of feeling powerful, even if all those were true or none of them are true. It doesn't feel good to think everything I know is not true, and it also doesn't feel good to think all those kinds of things are true. So to have some special skills, I had to change my conditional thinking and be open to learning new skills. The conditions I had were skills that were not serving me anymore. So feminine is the mirror to see in, And I started getting in touch with my feminine nature, that I could see in the mirror being the change or watching change, either one, whether everything's changing around me or I'm changing as everything stays still. And I realized that the no thing, when there's nothing there, no condition, it's a reflector for the light. And in that way, masculine can be a void under what it will be. Is unclear. It's unclear under what condition it will be. Then I looked at turning my pus, all these things coming up and out, these gross parts of me, these thoughts I didn't want to admit out loud. I turned them into my armor, into my warrior nature. I turned the waste into the ability to adapt my self's immunity, to be able to be not seen in these ways and care, to not let these thoughts have power over me. And that means I took the remnants of what felt like a broken home or broken love, broken relationships, trust, and became the transformer, as I said, the one who changes or the one who watches change. I was willing to be transformed, and I was willing to be the transformer for bringing more comfort and safety and unity into the world, no matter what. I increased the compassion that I had for suffering. In other words, I recognized how these conditions caused more suffering for me personally, and how I'm not the only one, and how not only did everyone in my family suffer, but so did those other people, the misfits, the friends, the men, and others I meet on the way. So I started looking at the water flowing, like I said, life and divine power itself, water flowing. It's also interesting to look at it in two ways. On the one hand, it's soothing over sensitive, thirsty parts of me. The lack of conditions is like water. There's no edges, so it flows. So I felt like the unconditional nature of water, life flowing, and love. And as I was being transformed, these sensitive parts of me were getting nourished and sustained, and they were spreading away and receding, and they didn't seem to need to be getting as much attention anymore. I loved the very parts of me that were feeling like the worst parts, and almost drowning even up to the nose at times. It felt like it was too much of a lack of conditions, and I didn't know who I was. And that also showed me that the unconditional nature can be overwhelming and feel unanchored, and showed me how brave I was, that I could go up to the point where the water was up to my nose. And focusing on the aimlessness that comes from the unconditional nature won't help. It's got to be remembering the reason for the path. So it's saying, if I could be anything, I'm going to choose to be this thing. I'm going to choose to be, for example, today, I'm going to choose to be the supporter, we might call it the prophetess, the one who's willing to be a channel for beyond just what I want, but for what's actually happening based on how things are. And that means being unconditional. That means letting go of the construct that's familiar in some capacity and saying, I'm willing to see more. I'm willing to even go all the way up to my nose. I'm willing to have some parts even feel raw, and the water could be almost like too much. Like if you have an open wound, I cut my finger, water on it actually was very painful. So there's that sense of what's the body healing? And now I'm going to talk a little bit about the bodily powers, but in other words, the life force, that unconditional, does have an aim. It is having edges in a body, and we get to use these edges for the unconditional and the conditional to bring forth something new in that space. And so body healing, and I've written for myself what that means to me, but I also would encourage you to look at it for yourself. So some women have repressed inner children or teenager, and I recognize this is true for my mother and many others, so long not wanting to be the adult, so long having to be the adult, having to be the one who doesn't care, who's going to shut up, who's going to take it, that this inner child needs to grow, or this inner teenager, and never got a chance. And so people are having children and being in relationships, including myself, before it's time. And this means that my inner child, or your inner child, or anyone's inner child or teenager, especially women in this current, change in the polarity of the system masculine-feminine dynamic. So really like recognizing that women need to cater to this inner child, this little girl, because if we don't, it'll come out at the worst times and it'll make us feel like all the worst parts of ourselves. And that's not who we are. We are unconditional in nature, but we need to also care for the conditional aspects, which may have needed a conditional type of love. And on the other side of it may have needed an unconditional type of love. So it's really showing up. Healing, based on where we came from, is showing up for what is. And some men want women who eat their feelings. And I don't mean only food. I mean who shut up and listen. And some men will pay into this cycle. And they don't want to let the old construct go where the man has all the answers and is the provider and is the man of the house, means he's in charge. And I miss it sometimes. I miss sometimes when, you know, you could just have like the guy be the superior and kind of revolve around him, let him be the son. But things are changing. So we need women, myself and all women, to show up for ourselves, become more whole. So we're not going to cater to that system of revolution around a man, but rather revolution around life and the higher power, which feeds both men and women. Instead of having women repress the feelings which are closest to us so that a man could feel powerful, he should be slowly but surely more capable in this new construct of feeling his own feelings and learning how to not direct them angrily at women or cause harm because he feels misunderstood or alone. And next, we can be dog-like, many of us, desperate even, frantic, when attention makes us repeat over and over what it is that worked. And yes, you like me, and I'm going to do the same makeup, and I'm going to wear the same clothes, and we revolve, and we make it become so important so that we could be mattering and viewed positively. And another comment about this is often like, if you look at dogs, we see when they want attention, sometimes they'll do something wrong, or toddlers do this. We assert power by impact. Sometimes if we feel really powerless, we will rebel. And this is what groups of people or small indigenous cultures have often struggled with, is there's this power people who are growing bigger and bigger and more dominant, and nothing is checking them. Nothing is saying, you're not the source of life, you're not the source of value, and yet you're deciding what's valuable and what's not for other people. And so rebellion is a part of healing. It's learning how to say no and how to have righteous anger and how to stand for the truth, but also how to protect ourselves. And another thing is sometimes we overattach to mystery because we want fantasy over reality. And we have to make space for imagination and imagine these things we want and imagine where we're going to be in 5 years and not get attached to these outcomes. Let them go and become cloudy again. But instead of attaching to these repressed fantasies, we bring them up and we see what we really want, so that we're not, you know, secretly wanting reassurance but never really admitting it to ourselves and constantly seeking these same realities that are not real because the people in front of us can't provide that reassurance, or the job is not going to, or we can't give it to ourselves based on what we're doing. So getting out of the fantasy, sometimes we have to spend time imagining and creating in the mind, so that we can then return to reality and see that was my imagination, instead of the unconditional becoming the conditional, and then we lose sense of the actual natural body power. Symbols and cults, or culture, subcultures, ideologies, they can be very healing and reassuring when in the realm of the unknown, these labels, these rules, because there are times where we really do have no idea what's right, and we need somebody to trust, we need a group to trust, we need a leadership. We need something to guide us the right way. We want what they have. And sometimes we do need to adopt symbols, but we can't let that symbol become unbreakable. It cannot be that the conditional is more powerful than the unconditional in that case. And finally, there's different aspects of body. So there's this sense of the Middle East. And that's really like the heart. That's like the spices and the passion and the beauty and the being able to live as like a bushman or something. And I would say, like, for me, I kind of named it my Moroccan aspect. It's or Yemenite or Egyptian, like this part of me that is in the heat of it all, you know. And then there's this like upper part, which is like not physically upper, but in the idea of upper, which is like a rock star, a leader. And I think of the rabbi's wife, Rebbitzin, in her own right. She was such a rock star. Her name was Rebbitzin Chaimishka, and she was private and classy, and yet she was able to interact with people, and she supported her husband without competing with him. And so I think of that as like, as a woman, like I have these like really high level capabilities. And finally, there's these bottom or lower level like stuff, and it's like the bug level of and having that in me sometimes, and I can be connected to all the bugs and how they are also walking on the earth where the creatures like them, and the dogs, like I said, this lower level kind of like dogs don't really mature much past 2 to 3 year old equivalent of a human. So in terms of looking to a dog for they might have unconditional love, but they don't necessarily have the capacity to bring it into the conditional world. We just get a taste of it in their eyes sometimes, or how they look at us. But they also want to hump a lot of things, and they also want to eat anything you let them. Unless you have a very small bred dog that's meant to be kind of a little snobby and like very sensitive, and some of these lap dogs or toy dogs. But really in the idea of dog, they need a job, and they need to, to feel important. Otherwise, they bark every time the bell rings. They don't have aspects of self-care necessarily in the same ways, but yet we can learn a lot about the unconditional from them. And I want to come back now to the middle again and say this Moroccan or Middle Eastern energy is also like the lion. It's the part of us that throws ourselves fully in and could fully do it and could handle the water up to here. And also, even while drinking water, is able to look around and keep track of the environment, and doesn't need to constantly answer back and have the last word. And this lion energy from the middle place is also able to say, I know how powerful I am, and I know what I've been through, and I know that I was up against like the worst demons in me, and so this gives me the strength to know I don't always have to fight to be in charge. I just am. And so I wish you that your historical conditions are clearly shown to you more as yielding the skills for your personal and collective healing role, and that you see these practices as inlets and outlets for the self to emerge and the bodily power. Thank you. Be well.